Howdy riders, welcome back to Ride Between the Wines virtual edition. Very special, awesome episode. I'm speaking with David O'Reilly, who is the winemaker of Owen Roe. He's in Washington State. Very, very cool story. Very excited, didn't know what I was getting into when I spoke to him, and great wines. So check that out. And then a little later in the episode, once again, I'm speaking with Greg Slattery of Curiosity Coffee for my local restaurant Take 5 segment. So buckle up. Let's ride.
The world we live in is an amazing one, full of passion, wonderment, and of course, fine wine. This is the story of one man's journey to fully understand and appreciate that world. So kick the tires and light the fires. It's time to ride between the wines.
It's Burgundian in style. Just a whisper of cherry.
Very nice legs.
This is so perfectly balanced.
Such an old world style.
Is this laced with tobacco? A total fruit bomb.
I say, Sir Ponce!
So, howdy, welcome back to Ride Between the Wines. I have got David O'Reilly with me from the cellar at, you're at Owen Roe right now, you're in Yakima?
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining. I'm super excited about these wines. So if we could just kind of start a little bit about how you got here with the wine bug and all of that before we really get into it.
Do you have a lot of time on your hands? That is a long story. But yeah, I'm one of 12 kids from this Irish family born in outside of the Republic of Ireland in Northern Ireland, and we ended up coming to North America after my dad's two brothers were tragically killed in a sectarian violence in Northern Ireland, and he truly just wanted to get away from everything. And we really considered just going back down. So my family's from this little county right on the border of Northern Ireland called County Cavan, and it's beautiful there. I love Cavan. It's one of my favorite places to go. But it's very agricultural. It's backwards, and in all the cool sense of the term backwards. I mean, my aunts were churning butter when we left in '78.
Wow.
Okay. So it was really cool. I remember one of them had said, "Hey, David, let's go grab a couple of chickens for dinner." And so I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." And I didn't realize I was chasing them.
The actual chickens.
I grabbed them, gave it to her, and we killed them, and that's what was for dinner that night. And my experience with Irish agricultural culture was, I mean, it was true back to the roots. And that's where my father grew up, and so he wanted to do something that was away from. He was a political science professor in Ireland, which wasn't necessarily rife with turmoil, because you're always weighing both sides of any political divide. And but he was more concerned just about the health of his 7 boys that he had, and he didn't want them to be kind of swept up in it. And when he was serving in the Second World War, and he was very young, he could not wear the uniform of the British Army. It was against the law in the Republic of Ireland because we were neutral. And but he wanted to serve, and so he went to Canada, and he served in the Canadian Army, as did a lot of Irishmen during the Second World War. And one of the things that he had to do in training was he was a merchant seaman, and basically working the Great Lakes and coming up the St. Lawrence River, and he loved that part of the world. And we ended up with him going to New Brunswick, Canada. Okay. And a totally crazy part of Canada. There are crazy French Canadians that are just the Acadians that came up from New Orleans, and just real salt of the earth. I mean, when we
about what age is this for you?
So I was literally right at 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
So just kind of old enough that you're aware. and young enough that you're naive and you have no idea what really is going on.
Right.
And we basically, he wanted to be there and then use that as a springboard to what he eventually was going to do, and that was we moved to northern British Columbia.
Okay.
And we are in the middle of nowhere, and we basically did subsistence farming, and we had an ecological logging company, and he had free labor. I'm almost 5'11", and I'm the runt of my family. Everyone else is these big burly guys. I'm the runt, and so we set up shop in this north of this little town called Bella Coola, which is just below the Panhandle in Alaska. But it's really both with that experience in Ireland, with back to the roots, and in New Brunswick, and I befriended this family of there were some what we call first generation in the U.S. we call them Native Americans, but they were first generations, and they were part of the Micmac tribe in New Brunswick, and so she would go out and be with her in the fields with a friend of mine, and again it was just really cool being again back to nature, and it's a long way of getting around to eventually with my father's very he was steeped in academe, and he read Latin and Greek, and it was very engaging human being, and kind of really challenged all of us, and any opinion we had, we were always challenged and challenged to discuss it and talk. So I ended up kind of using that to go to a great books program modeled after the University of Chicago, Mortimer Adler's great books, and it was all seminar style, and ended up down in the Central Coast in California. And so you can see I went from gray Ireland to gray, very cold New Brunswick to northern British Columbia to rainforest to Santa Barbara.
Got them all.
I actually loved it. I actually played semi-pro soccer there, and it was great. I loved it. But one of the things that I had a professor who loved wine, and he would do these little seminars, and and I'd go there, and he would talk about the influence of soil on, let's just say Sauvignon Blanc. And he would do Lake County Sauvignon Blancs and talk about elevation and soils. And it was really fascinating. And, the kind of the light bulb went on there. I'm like, I could earn a living by drinking. And this is Irishman's dream.
Oh, yeah.
So I was accepted to go to UC Davis, and I was like, do I really want to get another degree? What do I want to do? And I knew whatever I was going to do really wasn't necessarily going to be punching a time card for someone else. It was going to be doing something that was creative, and and I think one of the things that I really did learn about my upbringing was whatever you did, you kind of had to own it. It was something that came from you personally, especially in the fields. But then I also wanted to to deliver it. So package everything up, and when I saw this wine gig, I was like, that could be really great.
Yeah.
And growing up with we baked our own bread, we caught our own fish, and
caught your own chickens.
We did. I actually in high school I had 150 birds. I supplied eggs up and down our valley. We bartered for meat, and so it was a lot of work. I mean, we really worked hard, but it was a great experience. And from there it was also you think about that upbringing, you're constantly using your sense of smell and awareness of nature. And I mean, I was on a hike this morning. I get up really early, I went for a hike up, and I smelt this pine tree, and you're immediately transported to your experience with pine trees when you're younger, and so I just love. I mean, I've always loved my the sense of smell. And
yeah, absolutely.
When I was and I think when you taste our wines, I mean, I'm all about texture. I love, but it's aroma. Aroma gets me every time, and that's why I have one. I have a couple of favorite varietals, but they're all aromatic. Riesling, Noir. They're all aromatic, and so once I kind of found a mentor winemaker, I thought, even though I was accepted to get this degree, do I really want to go 4 more years to study something that really should be about passion?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the wines being made by people either who had graduated from UC Davis, and I have no issues with UC Davis at all.
Right.
But, I said to myself, what I'm going to do is, because my deficiency was in science and chemistry. And so what I was going to do is I'm going to start my own. I have no clue. I'm 21 years old. I'm going to start my own. I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And yeah, I don't have any science, but I'm going to hire a scientist. And so to this day, I have no science, but I have great scientists who work for me, So
Good.
But from there, I went from the Central Coast and immediately fell in love with Pinot Noir. And from there, it was like, well, do I want to make Central Coast Pinot Noir, or do I want to go and really
Oregon,
the Pacific Northwest? And I moved to Oregon.
Okay.
And I had a great experience, because it was you go from a winery where you're making wine to an estate vineyard where you're literally outdoors, and that's my love, is being outdoors. And so I had worked in a winery that was largely an estate property, and I lived outdoors. And to this day, you come up and visit our winery in Washington, I'm outside, I'm in the vineyards. And because obviously there's a reason why any person is where they are at. And I'm in Yakima Valley because I believe in the area. I believe in the soil and the terroir. But then from there, I want to take that extension and say, I not only believe in this here, I believe so much that it's 100% vineyard. And then obviously what we do in the winery is pretty. We're like, I don't know if Neanderthals drank wine, but we make wines like Neanderthals. We really don't do a whole. There's not alchemy involved. So my chemist in the lab, she might claim that she is really instrumental, but no, she's there. She's salt and pepper. Meat and potatoes are what happens out in the vineyard.
Oh, that's fantastic. Hey, I missed. How long were you in Willamette before you decided to make the jump to Washington?
So I was there for really, in some ways I'm still in the Willamette, man. I still have a home in Chehalem Mountain.
Okay.
And
awesome.
I'm down at least twice a week. And
okay.
still have an Oregon presence. And then, so, I would say it was probably, even after I had left, we were in the Willamette for another 10 years after, so really it was, I didn't move and make the full-time commitment to Washington until 2013. So it was really quite a while. So, from 92 to 2013. Now that involved a lot of day trips and back and forth and staying in Washington. So now it's kind of the reverse. I'm in Washington and then I do the day trips to Oregon and make sure that no one has broken into my house and living there.
It's a good decision.
It is, yeah.
And so Owen Roe proper opens in '99. Is that
correct?
Right timeline.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So I named the winery after this. Again, whenever you do something, it has to mean. This is not just a job. This is kind of my life and what my wife and I decided to do for a career. And so we named the winery Owen Roe after an Irish patriot, Owen Roe O'Neill, who was a general in the Spanish army, and he came back and set up the Confederacy of Ireland in 1642. And but he used as his base of operations the O'Reilly family castle in County Cavan, and you see on a few labels, so like a single vineyard Cabernet, and there's every single label that we have, it's kind of that nod to being Irish. Every label tells a story, and so you'll see that, if we have a lot of time and a lot of wine, you'll hear a lot of stories.
Well, that's one of the things that I really like. I didn't know I was going to get this background. This is fantastic, but one of the things that has always struck me about your wines is I really just love how clever the names and the labels are and the stories, which obviously on my side is a huge thing to be able to carry some of this stuff or have like eye-catching art or names or fun stuff. And you guys, yeah, you go. As soon as you mentioned that your father spoke Latin, and I'm like, oh, well, there's the ex umbris. I'm sure that's where it comes from, you know. And yeah, I love that it all has a tie to something. Can we taste and talk about a couple of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to get the first. You want to do umbris first?
Yeah, this one. No, I think we should do Sinister Hand.
Okay.
And so there's the Sinister Hand. So my family crest is a bloodied, severed hand. And the story goes that there was a feud in the family, and of course, Irish people and feuding. I mean, that's just like part of our social fabric. We fight for fun, and so there was, they were fighting over this piece of land, and that is the ancestral home that became, the fortress that Owen Roe stayed in and used as his base of operations against Oliver Cromwell. And so the story goes, and I always have to preface this because you have no idea when Irish people are telling stories, you have no, especially when they're 800 years old, most likely they're totally fabricated. But anyway, the story is that they had gathered all the family members together who were fighting over this piece of land, and they had a rowing competition. Whoever rowed across the lake and touched the land they were fighting over first got the land. And so supposedly my ancestor was in there, and he was lagging behind, and before someone touched land first, he grabs, why he had a sword on his boat, he grabs the sword, he cuts off his left hand and throws it ashore, and it touches land first. And this is before lawyers, so they give him the land, and he touched land first, right? So he somehow lives, and all of his descendants on the coat of arms have the severed left hand. And it is really interesting because that ended up becoming the emblem of the province of Ulster in Northern Ireland. And so the English Protestants did not take kindly to the fact that it was a left hand. And so if you look at it now, the red hand of Ulster on their emblem is right.
Interesting, because they don't want the sinister.
They didn't want sinister, and we are all about being sinister. We love being sinister.
That's the fun part of it.
That's right.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I kind of read that story, but I wanted to actually hear it. And that's a very, very interesting story.
I love it when if I'm doing a wine dinner and pouring this wine, you'll have some old lady say, "Is that true?" I'm like, "Of course it's true. 800 years of Irishmen drinking and telling stories. It's got to be true."
It's got to be true, right? Well, it's great. That's such a cool wine. Is this? Would you say that's the flagship of Owen Roe? I think it's one of the ones that I am most familiar with before we started selling your wine.
It's funny because I never used to think that, but it's the number one selling Owen Roe wine that I've.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but this is interesting because, it's Grenache based, it's Southern Rhone, and it's really neat. Tasting the Sinister Hand and the Ex Umbris Syrah is a great way to really kind of introduce people to viticulture in the Yakima Valley of Washington, because Grenache is, we're in a heat wave right now. It is just blistering. We're talking about today is going to be 105. And it is.
Envy you.
We love to brag about how we have these, diurnal shifts, these great day-night temperature swings. And, last night it only went down to 73. And we're used to being down to 53.
Yeah.
It goes really hot to really cold. Well, we're in one of those just dog days of summer, a couple of weeks where it's actually warm at night. And so Grenache loves that.
Good.
So this is the grape that just, it literally, it's a sugar making machine.
Mm-hmm.
And but where you have Grenache and Syrah planted together is really interesting, because if you take a look at at the Rhone, Northern Rhone, Southern Rhone, they're vastly different, obviously. Mm-hmm. You look at the Mistral and some of the cold winds of the Northern Rhone, And Syrah loves that. Syrah, it can be beautifully aromatic, and it has a lot of tension in the northern Rhone, whereas in the southern Rhone, you're looking at Châteauneuf du Pape is usually about 2/3 Grenache, and that's usually what I target with this, is about anywhere from about 55 to 65% Grenache. And then the remaining is a little bit of Syrah, Morvet, and then Cinsault. But Grenache really steals, the show with this wine, because, it doesn't. It's one of the last grapes that we pick. So if you were to, again, where we are in viticulture, the Yakima Valley is, you think Washington State. Here I'm between Washington and Oregon, and because we're east of the Cascade Mountain Range, we're desert, we're dry. The Cascades go to 14,000 feet. It holds back all that cool, moist air, keeps it in Seattle where it belongs, and that's why they have big trees, and people are grumpy and drink lots of coffee, and burn down buildings. And so you go to Washington, and we're it's much warmer in the summertime. It's very dry. So between our vineyard, we only get between 5 and 7 inches of moisture a year, and usually about half of that is in the form of snow. So it's really dry. We do need irrigation. We have to irrigate the vines, and so our average during the summertime, our average temperature is about 92 degrees, which is really quite warm. And it's, in some of the higher sites, and you think it's a little counterintuitive. Our estate goes up to about 1,450 feet. And usually it's in the upper parts of the blocks that we plant the grape varieties like Morvet and Grenache that require a lot of heat. And then as you go down the hillside, you actually plant the ones that can tolerate a little cooler area, because the cool area rushes down to the bottom. We have no marine influence at all, of course, and so a lot of what we deal with is elevation. So and then the cool air will rush down to the valley floor. So we'll have Grenache down, or we'll have Grenache up above, where at nighttime it can be 70 degrees. And, down on the valley floor, it can be, almost the same vineyard can be 55. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So we just work with nature to try to, to really select the areas that you plant the grapes in. And, it's one of the great things about being in a young growing area is, you have this blank slate. You literally then are given, I think about the giants of our industry. The giants of our industry are still alive. I mean, Mike Sauer, Red Willow, these are vineyards. I mean, even though we've had a history of grape growing in Eastern Washington, kind of late 1800s, early 1900s, with Prohibition, it came to an end. Yeah. And for the most part, people were planting other crops. And so it took Mike Sauer from Red Willow and David Lake from Columbia, and some of those early farmers come in and take a risk on trying to plant grapes that they felt that were suited for the area. And really, for the most part, people didn't understand, and so they thought, well, let's do white grapes because it's cool. It's Washington. We're so far north. We're really not that far north. We're far north in comparison to San Francisco, but we're not on the 39th. I mean, we just happen to be on the 45th, which is okay. It has some pedigree. In addition to Minneapolis, St. Paul, it also has Burgundy and Bordeaux, and so. But so I think that being given this this area and living there, I really didn't understand kind of how dynamic it was until I lived there. And so then once been on our estate property, I started looking at parts of the property that I'm like, this would be perfect for Grenache. And I've done some head pruned, very traditional looking Châteauneuf du Pape. It looks like vineyards because they're in cobblestone. They look like Châteauneuf vineyards.
You got the gallets.
Yeah, they do. And it's old riverbed, they've been washed, basically kind of washed. And then you had upheaval. Basically, was a an anticline with with some of the volcanation that happened in eastern Washington with volcanoes and and earth upheaval. We have riverbed on top of our hill, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so some of the Grenache, for example, in this Sinister Hand is from those blocks. And I think what you'll notice about the Grenache doesn't necessarily retain a lot of acidity. It's, as I was saying earlier, it's the sugar making machine. It's just this happy camper. It produces a lot of growth. It produces big berries. So it tends, not to be, deeply colored.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when I see someone that has 100% Grenache, I'm always kind of like, is it really? I mean, that's pretty good color. And, guys that, do 100% Grenache, even the very few producers in the realm that do it, they're not deeply colored. It doesn't have a lot of pigmentation. But what it does have is it's very approachable. It doesn't have a lot of tannin.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're, one of the things that we fight with in Eastern Washington, because our daylight is until, after 9 o'clock at night. And we got a lot of intense, especially west facing, late evening heat. And so we fight with tannins. We have no shortage of sunlight. If anything, that's something that we have, comes in spades. And so I'm shading, and trying to protect, a lot of excessive phenolics and tannins. And this is one grape variety where you just don't have to worry about it. It just doesn't have it.
Doesn't
and
matter.
That's what I love. It's just, I bottled the 19 vintage already. This is the 18 that I'm showing. I bottled the 19, and the 19 is beautiful. It's drinking great right now. And, so it's a lot of fun as a winemaker, to make a wine that you can truly have fun with. And, it's a drink now kind of style of wine. And that's what Sinister Hand's about. You'll pick up a little bit of a kind of a raspberry perfume, a lot of mouth coating textures, because it's not shine alcohol. I think of all the years I've made it since, since 2002, only one vintage has been under 14% alcohol. And it's not due to my wanting to, pick it earlier. It's just, you fight with Grenache. It wants to be a 15% alcohol bomb every year.
That's one of the things I was going to say, is that the alcohol is not noticeable on here at all. And I kind of thought that was going to, and I'm drinking the 17, but okay. I was expecting an expectation of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, basically from 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, those vintages have been extremely warm. They've been on the, kind of really the extreme end of the spectrum, especially 14, 15, and 16. 17 and 18, they were cooler, but not necessarily historically cool. Those are warm summers. You get a little bit like what we're just having now, where, you have the bookends were cool, but then the summers were intensely hot. So there was no shortage of sugar in 17 and 18. And so, what you have in your glass, I think, we're right at, it's just right around, hovering about like 14.1, 14.2. So really, it's not overly high, but it's, I like to drink wines that are modest. And it's one of the reasons why I did move to Eastern Washington was, because you do get to harvest, at least historically, after the equinox, and then that's when your daylight hours are really starting to plummet, and so you can let those grapes hang, get more additional flavor development and character, but not necessarily sugar accumulation.
It's interesting. Yeah, this is delicious. Very, very balanced. The acid is perfect on it. This is great.
So the natural acidity here is kind of fun, because it's like when we're working with a number of grape varieties, and you're working with them for a reason. Mourvèdre is probably as important in here, and it's only about 20% of the blend, but it adds that all that dark color, that spicy note that you get in there, but also acidity. So Mourvèdre can hang out there, and it, like Grenache, is one of the last grapes that we pick. But unlike Grenache, it's really high in acid. And so I can add that in as a spice component, like a chef coming up with all your ingredients. I add more vet, and then that just gives that nice little kind of backbone structure to it. Because otherwise, if you leave Grenache by itself, it's going to be pretty soft and juicy, and it's definitely a drink now wine.
Right.
And then with the other Chateauneuf friends in there, it just kind of restrains it a little bit.
Now let's talk about, so am I correct? Ex Umbris is something that your father, I know it stands for from the shadows.
Yes.
I imagine it's the, go ahead.
So ex umbris is Latin for out of the shadows, and it came about, it's just one of those things that when nature gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And so in 2002, we had one of our vineyards, Lewis Vineyard in the Columbia Valley, was totally engulfed by a wildfire, and but it's right at harvest time, and it was before I ever had even thought about the term smoke taint. I had no idea. I mean, we literally couldn't get to the vineyard to pick, and the fire trucks went in and parked in the vineyard and worked out from the vineyard because it was totally surrounded. So that the end posts of the vines were charred. Some of the vines were charred, and but it was close enough to Mill Creek, which is the local little depression there, that the smoke stayed in the vineyard, and then it literally permeated through the skins of the grapes. And Syrah has those natural smoky components. In fact, the test that we take to see whether or not we have smoke taint in our wines, you can actually have no smoke taint, and the Grenache, or excuse me, Syrah itself will actually show it. Yeah, because it's a natural component to Syrah. And so that's why when you take a look at some cool climate Syrah like Côte Rôtie, you tend to have that kind of that gamey smoked meat quality, in the just naturally there in the wine. And so when I had tasted this fruit, I was like, it tastes like someone just like sprinkled charcoal on it. I mean, it really was pretty gross. And but it was time to pick. I picked, and so during the fermentation, you could actually smell a little bit of and basically what happens is it's these two components, and they end up being even more extreme after fermentation. So sometimes you don't even notice it. You taste it a little bit, but after fermentation, they really become pronounced. And so it was after fermentation that we put the wine in the barrel, and we could have swore you open up the bung and it might have been coming out. I mean, it was terrible, and to this day, and terrible in the sense, as a winemaker, you kind of have this ideal what you want when you're making a wine. So for me, when I'm making Syrah, I love like the perfumed end of the spectrum. Syrah is a chameleon. It can give you, in a very warm climate, it can give you this big, a lot of alcohol, a lot of spice, a lot of fruit. And in the really cool climate, it's white pepper and clove and those other kind of spice components more that you equate with cooler climate and acid. And so you never know what you're going to get. And so as a winemaker, you kind of have this paradigm. This is what I want. This is what I'm shooting for. And when that doesn't happen, you're not necessarily disappointed, but you're like, this is not what I wanted to make. And so in 2002, I remember tasting the wine and saying, do I dump it down the drain or do I make the wine? And I had a fairly prominent wine writer from the Wine Spectator come in, and I literally was like, hey, this is the conversation I had. And he looked up at me and it's just like, are you serious? You're actually thinking about dumping this down the drain? I love this. I think this is fun.
That's awesome.
And like, well, I'm glad you think it is, because I think it's disgusting. It was like licking an ashtray And so, um, and and this is a way of saying that sometimes as a winemaker, you make wine that you don't like, and that happens. I usually try not. I want to. A little bit like your baby, and you want to like your baby, and sometimes your baby's ugly. Well, I had an ugly baby, and so I was like, what the hell do I do with this wine? And so
Oh, that's great.
I thought, okay, I'm going to make this wine, and it'll be, a one-off. I'm going to explain that I really did not intend to make this wine.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I too read all my medieval works in Latin, and there's a great Latin expression called ex umbris et imaginibus in veritatem. So out of the shadows and images into truth, and it's a play on Plato's cave allegory, where you don't necessarily see the essence of something. Sometimes you just see it by its accidents, by its shadow. And then, once you really come to know it, the light goes on. It's like, hey, that's a dog, that's a tree. Okay, I saw the shadow, and I assumed that's what it was.
It's a perfect name. This is great.
And it was like, when I made this wine, I had to come out of the fog of the smoke and into the bright, sunshine during harvest time. And so I made the wine. I explained on the back that it came from a fire, and I used that little tiny strip. I literally typed it on my computer, slapped it on a bottle. I had bottled the wine. I hadn't labeled it, and I gave it to the printer and said, "Hey, can you print that?" And he goes, "Is that the label?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like a sticker. I'm just gonna put a sticker on there and explain it away, and I'll never make this wine again. And it sold out overnight.
It's great.
People loved it. I'm like, you really like that wine? And so I have a bunch of this in my cellar, and every once in a while I'll open it up. And, especially on a barbecue, you have to have it at a barbecue. And people are like, oh, I love this wine. I'm like, I still hate this wine.
Well, wait. So now you have the challenge of mimicking it. So what, just super toasty barrels? What are you doing?
This is a testament to, sometimes you have these altruistic notions of what you're going to do as a winemaker, and so when invariably it's distributors, it came back to me and was like, okay, so when's the next vintage coming out? I'm like, there's not going to be a next vintage. I'm not even a U.S. citizen. I have to light the hillside on fire. I'm going to get arrested. They're going to deport me back to Ireland. This is not happening. And it's like, no, you got to do this. And so I thought, okay, I can kind of understand, that, and this is before I had any concept that these natural smoky elements were in Syrah. Mm-hmm. And I was just saying to myself, actually, to be honest with you, I was trying to rationalize those sales. It's like, I'd love to sell this wine and do it again. But, again, I had already, kind of made mentally that this wasn't happening. And so I'm going to make this as a real Owen Roe wine next year. And next year, there was no smoke. Wine was perfumed and pretty and textural, and I could kind of justify it because, again, it's still, it's relatively cool climate. It still had some of those natural smoky elements, and in fact, this vintage does not have any smoke in it, and yet I do test for it, and it always has.
It always does it anyways. That's funny.
Yeah. So, I just rationalized it, made it the next year, and it is behind Sinister Hand. Is right behind Sinister Hand is my next.
Your number two. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, I love Ex-Umbra Syrah. It's. I mean, I don't know why more Americans don't drink Syrah. I mean, I understand it to a certain degree because you never know what you're going to get. You don't know if it's going to be this blockbuster 15% alcohol or if it's going to be lean and mean and green. And but this is I think paradigm Yakima Valley Syrah, where you get those gorgeous aromatic esters. I mean, I'm picking when I get those kind of lavender violet notes in the nose, and so it has it, and it has a little smokiness. It has beautiful texture. And this is just, it's if you pour this for most people, most Americans, they
You're gonna
will
like it.
love it.
Mhm.
And then when you tell them it's Syrah, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. I'll have the Cabernet,
Yeah.
But I love it. It's one of my favorite wines to share with people.
Yeah, it's delicious. And I love the texture of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still get smoky.
It's still there. I love it.
Well, all right. Well, thanks for tasting the wines. I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I probably want to ask just one or two other questions before I let you go. So one of them, I kind of want to talk about your role now. So at this point, not only are you the Owen Roe winemaker, but I believe that you're the director of all the Pacific Northwest wines for Vintage Wine Estates, if that's accurate.
That's correct. Yes, correct. So, I have the opportunity now because, we merged our operations. We were acquired by Vintage Wine Estates and, just this past September.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things in negotiating, Pat Roney, who is, owns Vintage Wine Estates, had asked if I was interested in doing that. And I thought, at the time I was like, do I really want to, making wine at one winery is a challenge. Making wines from two states is already a challenge.
Right.
And he was like, well, listen, I just want you to still make wine in two states, but then you're going to have about 3 other facilities. And so one of them is Tamarack and Walla Walla. Well, Daddy Gordon, the winemaker at Tamarack, is the winemaker at Tamarack. If he needs something, he can call me. I don't have to babysit him. He's awesome. He's got his style. He's got his winery. They designed it, and so he doesn't really need anyone to tell him what to do.
Uh-huh.
If anything, I'll call him up and say, "Hey, Danny, what should I do here?" But we definitely are very collaborative. At our own winery at Owen Roe, I have 2 longtime cellar people. Jackie Evans has been really the day-to-day winemaker since 2013. So she runs every aspect of kind of wine chemistry. She's my chemist. So wine chemistry and then production, and then Francois Deripé he's actually he studied in Bordeaux, and he's the cellar master and assistant winemaker, and he runs the cellar from grape to bottle, and he is you don't cross him because everything is just meticulous. He is great. So I have a great team there, and then I oversee the Firesteed project, and that was one of the things that I really was pretty excited about because I'd never made wines in large lots, and so the large single bottling Firesteed is significant. It's one of the largest Oregon Pinot Noirs made, and so I kind of really took that as a challenge, and to see I love Oregon Pinot Noir. It's why I came to Pacific Northwest primarily. And but I've always been very egalitarian. I want wines that people can drink today. This is I make wines that you can put in your cellar and enjoy for 20 years.
Right.
And I'll never forget a comment of another elderly lady at one of my wine dinners, and I was kind of bragging that, hey, you put this wine in your cellar and it'll age for 20 years, and it'll be mind-blowing in 20 years. And she reminded me that at her age, she doesn't buy green bananas anymore. So
that's great. I like that.
Sometimes you just have to make wines that people are going to drink today, and that's what that wine is. And so now, I've kind of been challenged. Brian Croft is the winemaker at Firesteed, at the Firesteed facility down in near the Eola Hills. And he's been there for I don't know, 15 years, and he doesn't need to be babysat. And so my role is really to support him, what he's doing there, and then to try as the brand grows to go out and build relationships with vineyards. And again, it's one of those things. So it gets me out in more beautiful Oregon vineyards. It
Absolutely.
It's absolutely great. I mean, I love it, especially when it's 105 degrees in eastern Washington, and then you go down to the Willamette Valley and it's about 30 degrees cooler. It's perfect. It's great. So I've really enjoyed both, and with the pandemic, it's kept me from being just indoors, because we really have developed some very strict protocols, because in Yakima County we're one of the worst counties in the United States. We're very agricultural. We've had a lot of, early on we weren't very smart about, how we interacted, as an area. As a facility, Vintage Wine Estates has been very proactive with, establishing very strict protocols immediately.
That's great.
And so it really is great. So there's no non-Owen Roe employee allowed in our facility. So unless you're in the vineyard or in our winery, you're not allowed in the building. And so we've masked up early on. So that's at least, getting out to the vineyards has allowed me at least to get out. And,
a little solace, yeah.
Yeah, you get a little solace, absolutely. So it's been a really wonderful experience, since September, and, even during, obviously this catastrophe that we're undergoing right now.
I wanted to say, I make sure I mention two things that you just touched on. So for people watching at home, podcast started as audio only, and then I started in video. Usually it's right between the wines. Usually I'm in the car, but obviously that hasn't happened for a while. But there is an episode, which I'll link here somewhere, where I had Mandy Silver in the car with me, and we were talking all about Firesteed. So if you want to hear a little bit more of the background there, check that one out. And actually, on audio edition, my very first episode of my podcast ever was called "You Had Me at Merlot," and it was with Danny Gordon from Tamarack. So definitely check that out too. He was an awesome guy. I very much enjoyed getting to know him a little bit. Great. But I want to make sure that I mention those. Well, you make a million other wines, and I could ask you so much. I think I could be here all day with you. So let me just say thank you so much for taking the time out. I love the wines. I'm looking forward to taking them out and showing them off. Now I can kind of get in restaurants and show wines again a little bit. But yeah, thank you for everything. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Welcome back to Right Between the Wines. I'm here with Greg Slattery, owner of Curiosity Coffee.
Hello.
And he's making me some delicious coffee, true to form. This is my first time drinking natural coffee, which in
this is from Uganda
versus natural wine. I've just learned is a completely different thing. But give me the 2-second version that you just gave me, because I think it's kind of interesting.
So generally there's washed or natural coffee, and wash is what you would typically find anywhere. All of your store brand stuff's gonna, like grocery store style, is going to be washed. So the quick basics is that coffee is basically a seed inside of a fruit, and when they harvest it, natural is going to leave the fruit around the seed while it dries, and a washed is going to basically take all of that fruit off and wash it until none of it is left, and then dry that. So it gives you a more classic cup of coffee versus a natural, which is usually going to be fruitier. Sometimes it might be a little more floral, depends on where it's grown and the variety or varietal that it is.
And where do you say this was from?
This is from Uganda.
Uganda. Mm-hmm. Well, this is delicious. Thank you. So the episode that you guys just watched was with David O'Reilly from Owen Roe. And Owen Roe, A, is a wine that you can get at Curiosity Coffee. You can try some of their wines here. But B, is part of the Angel Share program. And so for the month of August, September, and October, every year, this particular set of wineries all get together, and Owen Roe in Washington and Oregon happen to be one of the wineries. And every time a bottle is sold, or a glass is drank somewhere within the state, and there's other states involved, money is donated locally to Harvest Hope Food Bank. So it's nice, because usually when you do stuff like this, it's on a national level or something. It's nice to know it's actually going right here in the community. And I will list beside, scroll somewhere, all the different wineries, and you can buy wine here, but literally almost every restaurant in the area has some wine by the glass that you can drink, and you're supporting this. And it's just a really cool, cool way to be able to do something I want to do anyways, which is drink. So that being said, let's move on to the actual Take 5. So I will say, in episode 20, when I was still in just audio, I was doing phone call take fives, and I actually did Greg for one. I have not repeated any questions. And also, I will say, Curiosity Coffee is the location where we did not one, but 2 live podcasts.
It's true.
And we will do more whenever we can do that again, which will hopefully be sooner than later. But that being said, let's get started with question number 1. Question number 1 is called Last Meal on Earth. So, last meal on Earth, no budget, what would you like to eat?
It's going to be pizza, and it's going to be very specific pizza.
It's not going to be white pizza, is it?
Well, that's not pizza. Pizza has to have red sauce. That is the rule. And it would be Chicago-style pizza and Detroit-style pizza. Not together, not mixed, like not as in like a hybrid.
Have
they
a
have
half one.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna have a whole of each if it's my last meal. This is I'm going down.
You're not watching calories.
I'm going down very full of pizza.
What is this? I know Chicago style. What is Detroit style?
So Detroit style, you can't really get here, except I know this sounds crazy, because people dog this place a lot, but they don't realize the magic that exists at Little Caesars. If you get their deep dish pizza, because it is Detroit style. It's the closest.
Dish. Are they
Well,
both deep dish?
they're both deep dish.
Okay.
So with Detroit style, you're usually using a special kind of cheese, and beyond that, it's usually square or rectangular. Sorry, but the cheese actually goes all the way to the edges, and it's like cooked all the way around.
That does sound good.
And it's the dough's a little more hydrated. I don't know, it's delicious. So Chicago style is, some people call it more of a casserole. They're also wrong, but it's, sauce on top sort of thing, and the bread itself isn't so thick, to where with the Detroit style you're getting like more of a thick. So it is a little bit more of what you would see when you get like, think closer to Sicilian, but better. It's delicious. But there would need to be, I would put pepperoni, fresh jalapenos, fresh banana peppers, onions, bacon, prosciutto, and probably some Tazo ham. And
Wow.
definitely no
I like it. The
pineapple.
spicy and the salt and the fat. You got enough pork on it. I love it.
I'll be very bloated when I die.
All right. Question number 2. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And clearly, that's the times that we're in right now.
Yes, 2020.
More towards one than the other. I want to know, this is, obviously, it's a huge struggle for everyone, but especially local businesses, and especially businesses that are in the hospitality industry. I'm sure you've gone all over the place with innovation, just trying to figure out what to do. What has worked? What are you guys trying here to kind of get through this?
I think part of it has been just trying to. We went to curbside online ordering immediately,
Right, I remember.
and we were fortunate to have a system already in place that allowed us to do that quickly. We're lucky too in that coffee to go is not like the wildest idea,
Right.
to where like your more gourmet fine dining kind of establishments. It is a little tougher to spend $40 on a steak and have to eat it at your own dining room table. Mainly we've just been trying to be innovative. We did a bodega for a while where we had, it was, when stuff was hard to get at the grocery store, we were able to connect with our food service providers who weren't selling toilet paper to restaurants because they weren't open. So we were able to get toilet paper and flour and yeast, and we sold so much yeast.
Yeah, you kind of turned into or you still are, but turned into more of a general store in a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
ways than,
And that's sort of like, now supply is usually pretty good at, your Publix and, Food Line and stuff like that. So that's sort of wind down. And now that we've now started to use outdoor seating, we wanted to wait. We just opened that up this week with our 2 picnic tables. Next week, we're going to start doing more of a parking lot sort of beer garden style every day after 3 o'clock roughly.
Okay.
And so we're looking for ways to be safe, and that's been our big thing. So we didn't rush to open. We didn't rush to add, like, you still can't come inside and sit down and have a cup of coffee. And I think because of that, and we've had a lot of people in our community, a lot of people in the neighborhoods who feel safe coming here, and that's something that's been really important to us. So I think safety's been really what's helped us survive. And I just feel lucky that we've been able to do that, because I know plenty of businesses that just, they hit a point where they had to open.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine losing a business, so I do not judge them for that at all.
This is terrifying.
It is, and it's tough, but we're very lucky to have such great customers that have made us feel safe too, and it's been wonderful.
That's nice. I like it. Okay. Hopefully you won't have to do it too much longer, or any of us. Question number 3. It's called Tea for 2, and it can be tea or coffee.
Okay.
But coffee for 2 doesn't sound right. Tea for 2. So you're going to sit down and share a cup of tea or coffee with anybody from all time. Who is it?
From all time?
So this is dead or alive. Could be the future if you know anybody. Probably not. Who is it and why?
Let's see. Tea for 2. That is a great question. Let's see. Probably Prince. I love Prince. I think he is. I love what he did for music. I love the name change scenario was great. I'd love to know more about that. I hear he likes to make people pancakes. So I envision tea, which I would totally drink tea or coffee with Prince. And I would, in the back of my mind, be wondering if I'm going to get pancakes. The Dave Chappelle episode where they talk about the basketball game, I would love to play basketball as well. So this is really, I'm hoping that it leads to me being able to play basketball with Prince and eat pancakes as well as drink tea.
Did you ever see that episode of New Girl he was on?
I did.
That's
so
he's amazing and
yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I also think he's the greatest. I think he's probably the greatest guitar player. I love the way he plays guitar. I think he plays guitar like he looks, which is remarkable. I think, I think it'd be Prince.
Nice. I like that. If you listen to the last Take 5 that we were talking about, we got a lot more into Craig's background, so I don't want to go over too much, but in a band traveling for 12 years, and then the 10 years after that, booking bands, and still here when there's bands to be booked and whatnot, doing that. So big music background. So that makes sense. All right, question number 4, Java jams. So every time we talk, every time we've done a tasting in here, it's always been about really weird pairings, not food pairings, but pairing something with something that has no sense. I think for 1 year we worked on a Thanksgiving pairing, and it's like, all right, what wine goes with creepy uncle? What wine goes with family members?
Yeah.
That being said, I want to know your favorite song and what coffee you would like to drink while you're listening to it or pair with it.
Wow, that's a good one too. My favorite song. I was trying to maybe think of something else. I don't know why, but really, if I just my gut instinct, favorite song is "Hey Jude."
Nice, love it.
I love the end, just the extended, it's. And if I was drinking coffee, I would probably want. It would be an African coffee. It would be a natural. It would be super blueberry fruity. It would probably be a Yirgacheffe Ethiopian. So Yirgacheffe being like the region area that it would be from. It's kind of known for having really kind of fruity coffees. Yeah, I think that's what it would be. I also like long songs, so I think it's long enough for me to really enjoy
The full
a cup. Yeah. I'd probably be done by the end of the song, but yeah.
It's a great answer. All right, number 5. Now, question number 5, I'm going to have to stop asking because it's called Stick the Landing, and I've noticed every single time I get to this point, the question is tell me what's so special about Curiosity Coffee and what separates it from everybody else. But usually by question 5, we've discussed a lot of it already. But give me, for somebody who's never been to Curiosity Coffee, what is it about and why is this place so special, which it is?
I think that what makes it special, we strive to be really community oriented, friendly, happy. So not only do I think we have just a really interesting selection of items, and that means coffee and tea and beer and wine,
Sake and hot sauce.
yeah, and food. Not that we have a menu now. So that's the other big thing too is we do a lot of interesting in-house sort of like baking and stuff like that. So the special stuff, that is kind of a harder thing to answer without seeming conceited, I guess. But I think what sets us apart is we have a huge natural African coffee selection. You're not generally going to see it a lot of other places. And we try to make and serve, this sort of third wave, which is what, a lot of people will call sort of the newer specialty coffee places. So we're offering that third wave service and, with pour overs and French presses and all sorts of different espresso drinks, but without the attitude, I guess you could say, or the pretension. That's been a big goal. Like it's just not something that we're into. It just never seems worth it to me, because life is beautiful and I don't have time to be snobby or to stick my nose up to somebody. So I think that's a big thing, and we get bagels from the Bronx.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Much
you.
Appreciate it. Buy any of the wines that I was talking about at lots of places, including this particular bottle. This is Sharecroppers. This is one of the Owen Roe wines that we were just talking to David O'Reilly about. So not only does it taste delicious, but it helps. All right, signing off. There you have it, another episode down. Thank you so much. I have not thanked Robert Gardner recently, but the awesome intro music is off of his Soul of Confidence soundtrack, and amazing saxophone player, very good guy who has allowed me to just steal that. So I want to make sure I mention that. I also haven't thanked my employer RNDC for a while, who've done an amazing job of trying to get us through COVID along with everybody else, not to mention just allowing me to meet all these fantastic winemakers and such. Thank you for listening. If you like this, please click the subscribe button, the picture of the face, share. If you're listening to this on Spotify or audio, you can also watch it on YouTube. If you're watching this and you want to just listen to, obviously it's available in just audio anywhere. Thank you so much for David O'Reilly and for Greg Slattery of Curiosity Coffee. Try these wines. Go get some cool coffee if you live in town. Other than that, see you next week. Till then, chin chin.